It feels to some people like to be a Christian means to give up on science. You have to check your brain at the door, and particularly around the origins of the earth, particularly around creation story that the Bible gives and evolution as scientists are working through this theory and getting deeper on it. How do you approach science as a Christian?
I think there are two groups of people for whom this question is important. The first are the group of people who are curious about faith and who are wondering. I'm thinking of my atheist or agnostic friends or people I've had conversation with around faith, and they feel that they have to check their brains to accept Jesus, or they can't accept evolution if they're going to follow Jesus, and they just are convinced by the science of evolution. And so to them, I would say that shouldn't be a barrier to following Jesus, that we can absolutely have a robust faith in Jesus and a deep appreciation for the elegance and the beauty of science, including evolutionary science. So I am someone who does accept evolution as how God created things, and I love Jesus, and the two I find can integrate very well. There are other people who ask this question, and I think they're coming more from a faith perspective. And these people, I think this question makes them scared or even angry, because it feels like if evolution is true, then my faith just all falls to pieces. And this is where I think it is important that we go back to Jesus. Jesus is ground zero for our faith. Jesus crucified, resurrected, and everything works out from there. And so because Jesus said, all scripture is fulfilled in me, this is one story that points to Jesus, we have a high view of scripture and appreciation of scripture. And we read it to understand and know Jesus. And so I think that can help us approach Genesis, which I think is often really problematic for people who are concerned that if the Bible is not literally true and isn't mirroring science, then either science is false or my faith is false. I think we can read Genesis very differently and with a lot more grace for ourselves and allow the Bible to be what it actually is. So I think those two people, I would just say, doesn't need to be a barrier. But actually, I am curious. I know that you probably are in a similar place with science. What would you say to that?
So I think you said it, but the assumption is that when we open the Bible and look to the first chapter, that we've got an explanation on how God created the earth. And I think that the Bible is going after a more important question, though I think science is important. It's the why.
Yeah.
The why gives this sort of momentum for the purpose of life. And then we can sort it. We can sort it from there. You probably want to talk about literary genre. Well, how do you, because this is the thing, right, for people, is how do I understand my Bible then if I can't believe what it says? It says 6 days or 7 days, and now you're telling me it's not 6 days or 7 days. And so, everything's out the window. So I have a couple thoughts on it, but I'm interested just in terms of the way you would look at the various pieces of the Bible. And I mean, literary genre, I just like saying the word genre because it makes me sound intelligent, but there is something to that, right?
For sure. I mean, we look at Psalm 23 and we would miss the whole point and all of the truth that's in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, if we tried to make that literally true. It just doesn't work. And so there are different places in the Bible where different forms, different genres are there. And to understand the truth that they're telling us about God and his love for us and how he wants to relate to us, we need to appreciate the form that's there. So the form that I think we find most in the early part of Genesis is this form that's called myth. And we can get a little bit nervous about that because we think it's the same as fairy tale. But this type of writing is trying to convey deep truth about who we are and what our purpose is and what is the meaning of life. And it's this form of writing that's designed for that. And that's what we find in the first chapters of Genesis.
What's interesting, this is, I'll probably belabor this. Maybe we'll take this out of the podcast.
Sure.
When I was in Israel, and I had this guide, and we were at this site that's called the Primacy of Peter. It's where Roman Catholics believe that Jesus declared Peter to be the Pope. And he asks me from my New Testament, do you know why there's 153 fish and they count all the fish up 150. I don't know. He goes, any number that's divisible by 3 points to God. And I mean, I actually said, have you thought about the Trinity? Because he's a Jewish guy. And have you thought about Jesus being in the grave for 3 days? And he's like, whatever. But he said the reason why we have this regard for the number 3 is the creation story. Because we see it as 2 3s. The first 1, 2, 3 days are when God creates habitations. And then the last ones, 4, 5, 6, are where he creates inhabitants for the habitations. And they saw it 2 very distinct things, 2 3s. And so even then I thought, okay, so you guys aren't trying to force a scientific explanation on this. You're looking for the deeper meanings, the why, and how it is that God works. On this, both my wife and I, we did undergraduate degrees in science, and Colleen did a biology degree, and she got a little bit cooked for having Christian convictions. She got laughed at times. She recalls one time when she was in a lab. Actually, I think she was in the professor's office out of this lab, and she says to this guy, Dr. Hyland, it seems like there might be a God, because they were looking at something fantastic. It was a plant biology course, and he goes over to the office door and shuts it and says to her, I will deny this if you ever report it to anybody else, but I see too many amazing things in here to believe that this all happened by chance. So it's kind of all right, it's too bad that scientists are scared.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly less so. People like Francis Collins are saying, I don't actually see the compete. I actually see this beautiful dovetail of this conviction that Earth is good and laws of nature, and believing then that there would be a good lawgiver to that. So, yeah.